People who got fired on the first day of the job, what happened? Not me, but happened when I was working at McDonald's. New guy came in, and when he saw that we were trashing patties if they had been sitting too long, he ate one, then he started just eating them from the supply. Dude must have inhaled 10 to 12 patties over a couple hours after repeatedly being told to stop. Eventually, he started making himself a burger with the buns and eating it as well. Got fired first day on the job. I'm still convinced he had no real plans of working and just wanted to see how many free burgers he could eat before getting canned. Janitor job at a hospital, cleaning bathrooms in the patients' rooms. An old lady laying in her bed called me over and said she was born in Germany, and she'd learned to speak English but couldn't read it very well. She had a get well card from someone and asked me to read the poem inside. I did. Someone reported me because I wasn't supposed to interact with patients. Got fired before lunch. It's unfortunate that the rule got used in that fashion, but it is there for a reason. My mother works in a hospital, and one of her coworkers talked a patient out of getting a life-saving surgery. The guy's family sued the hospital when he died later that week. I have a really good one, not of me being fired but of someone I fired about 4 hours into their first day. When I was in school, I worked as an assistant manager in a deli. In all those years, this one girl stood out as the absolutely worst employee imaginable. She was just so stupid. Things she did. Customer comes up and asks for an extra side of ranch dressing. We had those little plastic dressing cups all over the place. But does she use one? No. Her solution is to grab a napkin and pour some ranch dressing on it and hand it to the customer like that. When it was a bit slow, I said, "Hey, why don't you take a moment to wipe down the tables?" Obviously, I meant the empty tables. But I look over to see a whole group of customers cradling their food and drinks in their arms because she has asked them to take all the stuff off the tables so she could wipe it down. Like most restaurants, behind the counter and in the kitchen we have floor drains. This is so that at the end of the night when we wash the floors, we can use a copious amount of water to get them really clean and then squeegee the water into the floor drain. So a customer comes up and says he got the wrong drink, diet versus regular or whatever. I said, "Just pour it out and give him what he asked for." Rather than take 3 steps to the sink to pour the drink out, she turns around and pours it into the floor drain, getting soda all over the floor and splashing it onto our pants. While fixing a turkey sandwich, in plain view of the customer and myself, she kept popping pieces of the turkey into her mouth and eating them. Customer walks up to give her order and she says to her, "Do you mind if I go to the bathroom real quick before I take your order? I gotta go really bad." Customer asked for an egg white omelet. She asked me if he still had to pay for the whole egg. Customer asked for a medium coffee with part skim milk, part whole milk. She poured the coffee into 2 separate cups. One with skim milk and the other with whole milk. Final straw. In the middle of taking an order, she pulls her phone out and answers a text. The crazy part was when I told her that she should just leave, it didn't work out, and she shouldn't come back. She kept acting like it was my fault for not explaining stuff to her. Like the rule that you shouldn't answer a text in the middle of waiting on a customer, or that she didn't know we weren't supposed to use the floor drain to pour out drinks, or that she didn't know she wasn't supposed to ever tell a customer that she had to go to the bathroom, that she didn't know there was a rule against eating the turkey off of a customer's sandwich. And yeah, she was a college student. They called me and told me I was let go for not showing up on my first day. Which was a surprise for me since at no point after the interview had I been told that I'd been hired. This happened to me once. They called me 2 weeks later to see why I didn't start, and I said I was waiting on a call. They were very nice about it and checked their phone records, then called me back to start. It was really weird when I showed up and everyone was skeptically like, "Hey, why didn't you show up last week?" I'm a developer. We hired a guy who did an amazing interview. He really seemed to know his stuff and was clearly very intelligent and capable. On his first day, he saw some old code in a shitty legacy app which wasn't great, and he went fucking apeshit. Began ranting at his desk, then stood up from his desk and started shouting at his screen, then started verbally abusing the developer he thought had written the code. He hadn't. The other developer just sat and took the abuse calmly and tried to explain it wasn't his code. And anyway, we knew it was old and poorly written, but there was no plan for the team to rebuild it, etc. But it was futile, and he barely got a word in with the other guy just shouting him down in an endless tirade. He had a full meltdown, and was beyond civilized conversation. Project manager had to intervene and have an emergency meeting with the MD and the developer. They mutually agreed he wasn't right for the company. The guy eventually said he had Asperger's and had left many jobs for the same reason. A QA engineer, hired on the same day as I, was fired that same day. He marked the entire company's source code for deletion. He couldn't just delete it, but nobody had thought to restrict someone's ability to mark for delete. No devs could check in or out code. The guy begged for leniency, and explained that he didn't know what the files were and thought they were just sitting on his computer. His resume claimed 20 years' experience in software, but he had never heard of version control. He flipped out when he realized he was being fired. Further explanation: there were several confirmations and warnings that he did not read while doing this. His English was not very good. If it had been an intern, they would have been fine. But this dude was getting paid as a seasoned consultant. The interviewers had to have meetings to see what went wrong, and it came down to the fact that nobody could understand him, but due to his confidence and resume, they just assumed it was a language barrier, and it would not be an issue. Also, he came from a well-regarded agency. If he had been like, "Oops, sorry, I didn't realize what I did," he would have probably been fine. He argued with important people that he only deleted files on his computer and didn't seem to grasp the entire concept of version control. He was not nice about it, and after he was fired he yelled and made a scene. That being said, if he hadn't behaved so self-righteously and rudely, he would not have ended up losing his job on the first day. I have seen some very incompetent people stick around for years because they were agreeable people. I have got a seizure while serving someone at a new restaurant. It was my first of a 3-day trial period, so I don't think I was technically on the books yet. Needless to say, they never called me back. Failed the mandatory new hire drug test. I've never done drugs. This happened to my wife. She had never smoked weed, and they gave her a lie detector test which said she lied about smoking weed. Used to work at a factory that made food stuff. Guy I was trained with fell into a big vat of wet ingredients that was about to be heated up. Had I not looked behind me, he would have died. The boss went to the hospital to tell him he was fired, but they were giving him some extra pay in his check. I don't know if this counts, but my dad was interviewed for a job at a Dallas engineering firm in the 60s. They were up in Detroit, did a bunch of bulk interviews, processed offers on the spot. He was well qualified, it was a good offer. He gave notice at his current job and packed the family up and drove down. When he showed up on the first day, they met him and said, "Well, the guys in engineering decided they didn't want to work with any non-white engineers and they were supposed to call you 2 weeks ago and withdraw the offer." Worked at Pita Pit in college for a day. About halfway through my first shift, the manager asks if I have a car. I said yes. Why? He said I had to go get it and deliver for him till close because the driver he was into called out because she was too hungover. If I didn't, he said I was fired. He also told me I had to pay for my own gas and give all tips to him since I was still making $8.20 an hour instead of the $4.50 the drivers made plus tips. He handed me 7 bags and a list of MapQuest directions to them, 3 of the deliveries 10 plus miles away. Boss called me not even 15 minutes later screaming at me for not making all of the deliveries yet, and said that once I came back and gave him his tips, I was fired. With 5 deliveries left to go, I said fuck it, and went to my friend's place with the rest of the food. I was 16 and landed my first job in a paint store mixing custom colors for customers. On my first day, I mixed a requested color, following the paint manufacturer's directions exactly. But the result turned out wrong because the formula had changed and my employer had not updated his store's formula specifications. So when the customer complained about the color variance, the boss fired me in front of everyone even though I had done the job correctly. It was humiliating and left a lasting negative impression as to what's involved in joining the workplace. I was at the cafe for a day once. I was bussing a table and dropped a cup and whispered, "Shit." They never even told me that they fired me. I found out by going into work the next day to see me not on the schedule. I tried to talk to managers and everything, no one would tell me that I was fired. It was like a bad breakup with mind games, and eventually I had to force myself into the GM's office and made him explain to me what was going on. Shadiest shit ever. I got a job as a waiter at an Australian-themed steakhouse. They had me buy construction boots as part of their uniform and a pair of black shorts totaling $50. I had never worked as a waiter before, so they had me shadow one of their waitresses. I followed her for drink orders at 2 tables, and then she told the boss it wasn't going to work out. No idea what happened, and that was my last $50. In retrospect, that place just screams, "You don't want to work here," but I'm still mad about it a decade and a half later. How was she the deciding factor of employment? She was the lead waitress. She had influence with the managers for sure. I got hired as an independent contractor for some over-the-phone tech work. Hours were 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Okay, that's perfect. I go in and get acquainted, start taking calls, and hours go by. I'm wondering when I get lunch. News flash. No lunch, no breaks. Independent contractor or not, pretty sure here in the US you gotta give people some breaks and a lunch at some point in a 10-hour shift. Some kinda law about that, I feel sure. So I tell my new boss, "Look, I'm starving. I'm going to get something to eat. I'll be back in an hour." He said, "If you leave, don't bother coming back." So I left. And never went back. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.